Morning everyone. In this video we'll read Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. We'll briefly discuss the story of the poem and then we'll look at possible interpretations and meanings of the poem. I'll put a link below for the slides if you want them. Now why don't we get started by reading the poem? The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabre and the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian, reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honour the charge they made. Honour the Light Brigade. Noble 600. So, what's the story in this poem? Well, in the 1850s, there was a conflict between Russia and a group of other combined forces, and one of those was the British Empire. And this conflict became known as the Crimean War, and it was one of the first wars where the media sent reporters to the war to document it. And the story goes that Tennyson read a newspaper article about this particular battle and was inspired to write this poem. He was the poet laureate at the time, and it's a poet laureate's job to write poems about what's going on nationally. So what happens in the battle? Essentially, one of the higher-ups, blundered. They made a mistake. They received orders from the command, and they misunderstood them. And this led to the British forces, 600 cavalry soldiers, drawing their swords and charging towards the Russian forces. The reason that they're known as the Light Brigade is because they weren't armed with heavy weaponry, and they weren't heavily armoured either. They weren't exactly suited for the job of charging enemy forces. And these enemy forces, the Russians, were armed with guns and cannons. They were in a pretty decent defensive position with a great line of sight. So just imagine being told you need to charge into a valley armed only with a sword, when you know for a fact that you will have guns and cannons in front of you and on both sides of you, and those soldiers are expecting you coming. Imagine the feelings racing through your mind at that point. Now this manoeuvre led to 118 soldiers killed, 127 wounded, and 60 taken prisoner, with 335 horses killed too. It was such a reckless move that apparently the Russians assumed that the British soldiers were drunk. So, what does it all mean? Well, we can only make educated guesses, and it's impossible to know for certain. As poet laureate, Tennyson couldn't quite come out and criticise those in power, so his true intentions, thoughts and feelings might be hidden, or not even genuinely expressed, so that leaves us to infer, and that's what we're about to do. Now if you find this kind of content useful, and you want more like it, hit the like button or leave a comment. A bit of feedback will help me work out what sort of content you find useful, so I can make more of it. Or less of it if you don't find it useful. Right, message. Here we go. The most obvious is that this is a straight up tribute to the bravery of the men who lost their lives in this battle. There's lots of language that paints the soldiers as heroes who were willing to follow orders, any orders, even ones that led to certain death, serving their duty to their country. Tennyson seems to admire this sense of patriotism and sacrifice, and he wants the men to be remembered and immortalised. And he managed to do that. It's been over 160 years and we're still talking about this battle, remembering the sacrifice of the dead, in part due to Tennyson's poem. The poem discusses the effects of conflict and war, and seems to raise questions about the morality of war. Is it right to send hundreds of men needlessly to their deaths? Is it right to treat human lives as so disposable? Is war ever really justified? Now keep in mind that this was an era before radios, before televisions, before the internet, even before video cameras. This was one of the first wars where the public were kept informed about what was going on by war correspondents. So as poet laureate, Tennyson is reporting on the war in a way. And the language that he's used suggests he was horrified by the war. He does a pretty good job of displaying the confusion, the chaos, the violence of the battle, possibly swaying public opinion on the war. He really brings to mind the harsh realities of war, rather than this mythical stories about honour and glory that was painted about war. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Tennyson couldn't come out and condemn the actions of those in charge. The politics involved in his position as laureate would have made it difficult to do that. Instead, we can find small criticisms in the poem. Now, the major part of the poem, the obvious part, is a tribute to the sacrifice of the 600. But here and there are small references that expose the fact that these men died due to mistakes that were made by those in charge. So this poem could act as a criticism, or an exposition of those in charge, and the decisions that they made that led to the needless loss of life. Perhaps he's saying that they've got a huge responsibility on their shoulders, with grave and dire consequences should they make a mistake. Their decisions are not to be made lightly. In that way, the poem could be seen as a warning to all future military leaders too, such as the ones today. He's saying, do not follow this example, do not make the same mistakes, do not be so flippant with human lives. Or could there be another message that you've taken from this poem? If you've got any ideas, I'd love to hear about them in the comments section. The thing I love most about literature is the endless different ways that we can all see the same text. So let me know your thoughts. And that's all for today's video. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching, and happy revising.